take back to the starting point. What is eco-psychology? Because when I talk about it, nobody knows. And it's really an interesting story of how I found it, because I've always been into nature, and my background is psychology. And I thought, if I have to do something that I love, I'm going to do something related to nature and psychology. Is there such a thing? So what would you call psychology that's connected to nature? Eco-psychology. And it looks at the relationship between humans and nature, and how this relationship, this connection, can promote personal, social, and environmental well-being. So, kind of interesting, but how did I get there? And I got the chance to go to Spain, beautiful nature, and I was like, my God, there's sun, which, you know, we don't have here. It was incredible. So I went there, and this was literally the start of me finding eco-psychology, because I went to this retreat, and this is where it kind of gets a bit weird, because I always kind of imagined I could hear trees talking. Imagine. I'll tell you a little bit about research on that afterwards, which is really fascinating. And I went to this retreat for the weekend, and there was this most majestic oak tree in the corner of the field. And it just had this lovely energy, and it was so tall and so proud. And it was like, come climb me. And I'm like, okay, and the tree's talking to me. Am I insane? Saying climb me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go with this. Why not? Let's try and see what happens. And I got up to the tree, and I was waiting, because the tree's like, no, not yet, not yet. And I'm like, okay, well, when? And on the Sunday morning, it says, okay, you can climb it. And I was like, okay, so how did I get up this tree? It had been a good few years since I'd done tree climbing. And the tree went, and I will say the tree went. The tree did not speak in English, just to clarify that. There was something else going on. The tree says, climb up this way. So I climbed up this way. And then when I got to the top of the tree, I couldn't get back down. The tree was like, no, it's fine. See that bit of plastic in my branches? You need to climb to the edge of the tree. Me, being the tree, grab it. And I was like, really? No. It's like, then you just slide down the trunk, not the trunk, what is it? A branch, thank you very much, that bit. And you'll get dragged down to earth. I'm kind of sitting in this tree going, okay, so I'm either completely off my head, or there's a conversation going on that I have absolutely no understanding what this is. So I now have this moment, this choice. Do I trust what's happening, or do I not trust it? I thought, well, I'm going to trust it, see what happens. So, right enough, I followed the instructions of the tree to climb out to the branch, right on the outer edge, to get this little bit of plastic. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of cool. Sat on the branch, bouncing up and down, and then what a bird. A bird looks like on a branch and feels like, because it was amazing. And then I got a little bit nervous, because sliding down the branch to the ground, and we were high up in this tree. So I decided to go back up the way that I'd come. And the tree's like, you're going to fall. And I'm like, I get halfway up and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, actually I'm going to fall. So I realised I had been left with no choice. I actually had to slide down this tree on its branches, and exactly as the tree had said, right down to the earth. And I was like, okay, this is rather fascinating, because even within the field of psychology, I mean, this is pretty strange stuff. The interesting research that I actually want to tell you about plant intelligence, just to kind of back this up and reassure myself that I'm not completely mad, is that scientists are actually exploring plants, and they're discovering that not only do plants have their own intelligence, they have their own sense of self. They know how to defend themselves against predators. They have, according to the researcher, who is Italian, Dr. Stefano Mancuno, 15 additional senses. As you're going to discover, we actually have 54, so just a little bit ahead of him. But there's even an alternative research centre in Italy as well called Daminar. And what they've developed is a biofeedback technology that when they connect to it, the plants learn how to play music. When they connect plants up to little motorised go-karts, the plants learn how to control the go-karts. I will let you make up your own mind because it's a pretty radical concept, but this is what's emerging. So, I knew that I needed to explain this because what happened when that moment that I was up in those trees is that I had this, I suppose, a realisation that everything was connected. That my brother hadn't died, he was just in nature, and nature and my brother was the same thing. And literally, the grief, the pain that I've been working through just went, boom! So much so that I will have people arguing with me and telling me that there's absolutely no way that I can not have any grief over my brother's death. Interesting, but it's my experience. It literally just went through this connection. So I knew I needed to find a way to explain it. And this is how I ended up discovering the weird and wacky, wonderful world of eco-psychology. Because it's still not fully established science, as in mainstream science. It's still emerging, because it only started emerging in the 1960s, after we started realising the impact of what was going on through our disconnection to nature, and looking at how do we reconnect. If you go to the dictionary, because I like going to the dictionary, you will find that nature is not just the natural world, but it is everything within the universe. It is the physical and the non-physical. So if we're taking a step further, nature is all that there is, which is kind of fascinating. And it's really an interesting concept to sit and think about, because when we actually look at it, we're making a distinction, exactly like you did. This is nature and this is not nature. We're creating a separation. And even when we're on a spiritual journey, we're saying, well, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. We're creating a separation. But if nature is all that is, then nature, outside, inside, everywhere, is the physical manifestation of the non-nature, non-physical nature. So the reason that I say this is because what we're actually discovering as we are journeying through this world of eco-psychology is that as humans, we are fundamentally connected as physical beings to the natural world. And I want to give you just a little bit of the research that's kind of coming out, which I absolutely love. First and foremost, plants produce little phytocytes, they're called, which are basically chemicals. When you're out and you're around plants, you're breathing these chemicals in, they are actually interacting with your immune system, reducing stress and boosting your immunity. So from the moment you're outside, nature is going, hey, I'm going to make you feel better. Even down, if there's any gardeners, there's bacteria in the soil, which triggers serotonin, the production of the happy drug in the body. And it's not even just like that. When we're out in nature, there's a physical change within our brainwave patterns. And today's world is kind of rather busy. And I'm sure I speak for everybody when you know how you've got that moment in your head where you're like, oh my freaking God, and I'm so stressed out, and I'm so pissed off, and I can't stop my mind, and my mind is going, and I'm thinking about this, and that, and that, and that, and literally you're like, would you just shut up? Am I speaking for myself, or is it for everybody else? Good. Because there's something about nature that actually interacts with your brainwaves. And what is fascinating is that when you look at research into meditation, reducing pain, enhancing calm, boosting your immune system, you will get this just from going out to nature. Because what actually happens is there's all these wonderful processes, which I'm not going to get into the technical details of, but even just looking at nature will actually trigger a change within your brainwave state. So you move from the beta brainwave state, which is a really busy one that we spend so much of our time in, down into the alpha one, which is where we're actually meditating, we're kind of relaxed. But nature will take you even deeper into the theta brainwave state. And what's awesome is, that's where your mind stops talking to you. There is silence. And you're able to be really present, really engaged with life. And this is why we're needing to it's interacting with our physical bodies, it's interacting with the chemicals, with the brain waves. But the benefits are kind of fascinating. Who has a desk job? Nobody! Oh man! Who works? Who works in a space where they're inside a lot? Sometimes. Do you know that actually having plants in your workspace, in your environment, I put this down to remember the statistics, will actually increase your well-being by 47%, boost your creativity by 45%, and productivity by 38%. Now I have no idea how they got statistics from that, but they measured it. They've also actually discovered that workplace, like plants in the workplace, will actually reduce staff illness and reduce absenteeism. That's I can never say that word, statistically significant. So we're seeing this within the workplace. Kids with ADHD, their behaviour improves after being outside. If you are recovering from isolation, and this is my favourite one, even just a view of nature will actually reduce your recovery time, boost the repair, and experience less complications and less pain. I mean, literally, there is nothing that nature cannot do. But we've needed to develop a whole field of psychology to discover this, when really we actually knew this all along. And the problem is that because before, when we had an unconscious connection to nature, we didn't need to think about it. But now that we've created this disconnect, we do. And this is where our 54 senses come in. Because we have 3 fantastic senses. And I'm not going to talk about all the senses. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on an experience and adventure to let you feel them within your body. See which ones you can recognise and sense. See which ones are a bit like, really, that's a sense? But there's 3 key ones that we experience far too much. And that's our sense of fear, our sense of pain, and our sense of distress. But what do we do when these senses are alerted? Because what these senses are saying is, reconnect to nature! You are disconnected! This is not good! Bad! Back to nature. Do we do this? No. We will get up and we will go to a job that we're not enjoying, or we will stay up all night worrying about something that might or might not happen. We will tie ourselves in knots with these 3 senses, not realising that they're actually only there to say, reconnect. Go back to nature, back to where you came from. And there's a problem because the way that civilization has been built, there's an inherent premise in civilization that says that we are separate from nature and nature should be conquered and dominated. Okay? Talked about in numerous other books. Charles Eisenstein, who talks about Brave New World, is one of the people that mention it, but it's been looked at again and again and again. So we don't realise that everything that we're doing is based on this fundamental disconnect principle. And what's happened is our mind, which is actually only a sense, by the way, we don't actually have a mind, we have a sense of mind, but it's been dominated, it's been expanded, connected to these senses of fear. Also tapped in sense of logic and reason, because logic and reason is very good. Sense of intuition, not so much. We don't want to listen to that. So there's been this imbalance created within our senses. So we're not actually knowing how to reconnect and rebalance. When we use the 54 senses, and this is the foundation of all the work that I do, the nature process, this is the basic bit. The reason that the 54 senses are so foundational, because if you actually get this and understand that you're probably using all of these senses a lot more, but you're not thinking about them because we've been taught there are only 5 senses. And I can't even name the 5 because it's like sight, sound, whatever. And we've reduced ourselves to this limited way of experiencing the world. Yet if we expand our senses, we're able to engage more, discover the world that's out there, maybe even understand why trees are talking to us, because it's a sensory experience. And realising that this interaction, this relationship is coming through the senses. And it's really interesting because having had this experience, the best way to do this is out in nature. I mean, would have loved to have taken you outside, My plan was maybe to connect it to some natural objects, but this is far more fun to actually do it this way. And go back out the next time that you're actually outside and see how you experience nature differently. When people do this, they'll start to see energy where there was never energy before. If you look at the trees, what's awesome is trees, and especially the sky, are a good thing to do this. When you're really present, can you see the energy fields of the trees? And it's a subtle, shimmery, sparkly thing that if you're not present, you're not going to notice it. If you can't see it just now, don't worry, you get to play with this. And see how much more vivid nature becomes as you ground, as you become fully conscious in that moment. And the thing that's really, really powerful and important for this, about why, again, bringing it back to where I started, of being outside, the research shows that even the simple act of forest bathing, which is awesome, Japanese rock, by the way, this is them who've done the research, even half a day spent in a forest will reduce your stress and boost your cognition, i.e. boost your decision-making abilities for up to a month. So even if it's only once a month, it's better than nothing. But ideally, you're wanting to get out every day. It is not so much the quality of time, or the quantity, rather, I'm getting mixed up, the quantity of time, it's the quality. Because we have this question of how can people be outside in nature and throw away their trash and respect it and do all this stuff to it? It's because they're not present. They're not really witnessing what's around them. So again, it's the same for us. What then happens if we go out and we really witness the earth? Not only that, take it a little step further. If we're all connected, then that outside is really this inside. And how about going out, like North Berwick Law, going to the top of the lawn, looking around and actually going, oh my God, this is me. This is really just an extension of this self. It's interesting to think what would happen in the world if we actually came from this place and allowed ourselves to be really expansive and grounded, because you'll find that, and I'm sure for you, there were so many of those senses that you were like, know that one, but didn't maybe think of it as a sense before. Didn't really realise that I could get information. And when I talk about the tree talking to me, as I've played and explored and worked with these senses over the last 5 years and taught them to other people, it was the sensory communication. This is how nature communicates to us. This is nature's language. We have just forgotten how to listen. And when we listen, well, isn't it interesting? If the research is showing that the trees have their own intelligence, their sense of self, that they can actually drive little go-karts and make music, which boggles my mind. And if there's any vegetarians out here who, on principle of not eating meat, how does that actually fit your mode of reality when you actually sit and think, my goodness, but the plants can actually sense the same things as this? I mean, it's a total mind shift. The more you practice with these, I mean, this is the 54 senses, and this whole concept of natural presence is the first part of the nature process. So there's 4 more stages that you get to play with that we're not going into today. I'll follow the 5-step summary that you'll understand. But what then happens when you're actually out in this foundation? This is all you really need. If everybody actually got this, there would be a completely different experience. It's so fundamental. Because when you're in your 54 senses and you're present, you can then feel within your body. So it's an embodied state of being. And this is really what we're doing, grounding back into the body and recognising that that's just the other self. So the nature process is go out and get present in nature. Drop into your body. Because when we experience the fear, the pain, the distress, as I hope you experienced throughout this session, you realise that there was places in your body that you probably felt it. Is that right? Or most people? Yeah. So that's the sense that tells you that is not you. That is some story that has been created by a civilization that wants to disconnect you from who you truly are. Let it go. And then from that moment, you pay attention through your senses to what attracts you. Okay? Because we're really working on opposites attract. If that is you, you're looking for a representation of your true being, nature. You find an aspect of nature, that's because it then asks permission, which is how to engage in relationship with the earth, to step into true partnership. And if the whole concept of plants actually being living sentient beings are a little bit too extreme for you, you can just think of the permission actually as a ritual. How would you engage with yourself? Do you not give yourself permission to do things, to be? Then apply the same principle. Because what happens is when we're connected to nature, there's a release that's going on. That we do not need to get caught up in the whole mind analysis of, oh my goodness, the reason that I'm actually having such a hard job at this precise moment is because actually when I was 5 years old, this happened and that traumatized me. That, again, is this imbalance within the senses that stops us from just being present. Because the thing that really interests me and kind of fascinates me with this whole concept is, if we have a story about connecting to nature, it means there has to be a disconnect to have the story. Because if there was no disconnect, there would be no story of connection. Which is fascinating. And this means in terms of viewing the earth as a resource, even viewing the earth as Mother Nature, it is a label that can actually stop us from really going into a deeper relationship. Because then you're assuming that this is some, however you interpret the language, and it's really about letting go of all language and coming into the senses and finding a new way of being. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed my time with you today.
Thank you.